Daf Chav Zayin. If a woman gives birth, and even many days later, 33 days later, she births the afterbirth, we could assume that there's a connection between the afterbirth and her original birth. And we don't say that perhaps in the afterbirth there's a second child. When it comes to twins, it's also possible for two twins to be born with a great separation, even as much as 23 days and more. The Gemara says they were discussing what's the maximum separation between twins. And they said, look, right in front of you, you have Chizkiah and Rabbi Yehuda, the sons of Rabbi Chia, who were born 3 months apart and they were twins. The Gemara says in Machlaikas, if a woman can give birth limikutain, that is, can a woman give birth in the beginning of the 9th month? If she can give birth in the beginning of the 9th month, it's possible for a woman to give birth to one twin at the end of the 7th and in the beginning of the 9th, and then you have a 33-day separation. But if she cannot give birth in the beginning of the 9th month, so then the only way to have a separation between the twins is if she gives birth to them in the 7th month. Because in the 7th month there's no machlekes. You could give birth in the beginning of the 7th and at the end of the 7th, so you have at least a 30-day separation. If you take this shilya, the afterbirth, and you move it to another house, according to everybody, the second house is not tummy. The machlekes is if it remains in the first place. Remeir says the first house is tummy because the afterbirth did not disintegrate. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi, all three of them say the same thing. They say the first house is tar. Why? Explains Rav Papa's Rebbe Rav Amnuna that the fetus that's within the afterbirth is a lot less in volume than the blood in the afterbirth, and therefore it becomes batal b'roiv. Adds Rav Papa, this is in fact the same reason that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi say that there's no tomb in the first house. So Rav Amnuna, the Rebbe, started laughing. Why do you have to add that? It's obvious. Says Rav Papa, sometimes you have to add the obvious. Because it says in the pasuk, Im novaldu bisnasei. If you put yourself down, bisnasei, you will rise from that. However, vim zamoisa yad lepeh. If you put your hand on your mouth, in other words, you don't ask questions, even silly questions, zamoisa, that will put you down. Reb Shimon holds when it comes to corpse dust, if a body disintegrates and becomes dust, it's metama house ba'il when you have a ladle full of dust. However, says Reb Shimon, if you add to that ladle even a very small amount of anything, dirt, it's mevatel the whole ladle and it's not metama the house. Why? Why does Reb Shimon say that? Reb Shimon holds that in order to create corpse dust, it has to come from a pure source. It has to be 100% corpse. It can't have anything else. It can't have tachrichim, clothing, dirt. In fact, you have to bury the dead without any clothing, and in a marble coffin. It has to be extremely clean. Therefore, if you add a little bit to it, it's mevatel the corpse dust. But when it comes to shilya in our sugya, the reason why the shilya is tar is because it's batal b'roiv. Another interesting halacha when it comes to the corpse dust is corpse dust has to be from a regular dead person and not from a person that was killed, because while the person was killed, he lost blood, and in order to have this rekev, it has to be from 100% of the dead and not 98%. What happens if you take this corpse dust and you spread it through the house? Chachamim say the house is tamei. Why? Because they hold there's oil acher oil. You could take one oil in this part of the house and add it to another oil, combine oyalim for one oil, and it creates tumah. Reb Shimon says there's another issue here. When you put the dust on the floor is dirty and has to be 100% pure dust, and therefore the house is tar. There's something called afar beis hakfaros. It's the same thing as corpse dust, but incorporated in it is also the shrouds, the tachrichim, the clothing that the mace was wearing, or other dirt on the floor. In order to be mitama house, we said you need a ladle full. So in this case, you would need a ladle plus somewhat to incorporate the clothing as well. That's according to Rashi in Chachamim, which is difficult to understand. When it comes to a large animal, such as a cow, who miscarried a chunk of blood, and this was its first birth, her first birth, we say that this chunk of blood is a bechar, and we have to treat it with respect and bury it. On the other hand, this chunk of blood doesn't create any tumah if you touch it or lift it. Why is that? Because this chunk of blood is batal b'roiv. Well, if it's batal b'roiv, then why is it mitame? Why is it? That's why it's not mitame. But why do you have to bury it? The answer is the reason why you bury it is in order to announce to everybody that this animal has no chiyuv of bechar any longer. because this is its bechar. Although Reb Shimon says that afterbirth doesn't create tumah in a house, but it creates tumah to the woman who gave birth to it, just as any birth creates tumas yoledes, this is also considered a birth. The Gemara brings a pasuk, Ishok Tazria biyolda. If a woman gives birth, even tazria, even if it's like zera, it's nothing, it still creates tumah. Rish Lakish holds that if you have a dead person that was burnt to a crisp, it's not recognizable, there's no longer any tumah from the mace. Therefore, if you take a shvir, you take an embryo, and you mix it up really good, that you cannot tell that it's an embryo, the embryo doesn't create tumah. Have a wonderful day.